Okay, hi everybody. I am so excited to be here today to talk about the intersection between remote work and diversity and inclusion. My name is Micole Garatti. I am the Director of Marketing at Fairygodboss, but we are not here to talk about me. So Kay, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Absolutely. So my name is Fabella. I am a DEI consultant and remote team expert. I'm originally from California, but I'm based in Spain. And it seems that immigration is a genetic thing because my parents are also Filipino immigrants themselves to the US. And I work with global organizations, the likes of Philips, Red Hat, the IMF, and more, to really hone in on how do we actually make our cultures inclusive for diverse teams, especially in a distributed environment. So I'm super excited to be here today.
All right, great. Welcome. Rocki, would you like to go next?
I would love to. Hey, RAC attendees, we're so excited to be here today. My name is Rocki Howard. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer for SmartRecruiters. And at SmartRecruiters, we have a mission to actually help eradicate racism and discrimination in the recruiting industry. So my role is to actually build processes, frameworks, and evolve technology to support our clients and their needs to get to diversity outcomes. And I'm also responsible for partnering with our head of people to drive diversity initiatives internally within our organization. I am also a podcaster. I host the Grown Woman Life podcast for bold, brilliant, badass women over 40 in their careers. And we'll soon be launching the Voices of Diversity podcast to give a voice to those who work in corporate and who are underrepresented. So I'm so excited to be here with these brilliant women.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Rocki, we're also going to have to start talking about that podcast later because I know a ton of guests that would be amazing for it. All right, Kimberly.
Yeah, good morning, RAC. I'm Kimberly Jones. I am the Senior Director for Enterprise Talent Strategy at the University of California, Irvine, located in Orange County. We are the second largest employer behind Disney in Orange County. And so I have responsibility for creating talent strategy for campus, the medical center, which is the hospital, and then also the medical college. And so it has been an interesting time on campus trying to keep students and staff safe, but also one of the sites that is currently administering the COVID vaccine. So I take a lot of pride in the work that I've been able to do. I also still manage my consulting practice as well, providing TA strategy and support. And let me tell you, one of the reasons why this topic was important for me. I live and breathe diversity. I'm the youngest of 11. I grew up with 9 sisters and 1 brother, and I have every version of sister you can possibly imagine. So I learned about diversity as a child, but this intersection of remote and DEI through my career, I've had an opportunity to move across the country 6 times, Columbus to Indianapolis, Indianapolis to Denver, Denver to DC, DC back to Indy, Indy to Cincinnati, Cincinnati to LA. And so none of that would have been possible without technology, and just watching technology evolve over the past 16 years has been amazing. So I'm looking forward to this discussion, what we will do as a badass team, according to Rocki, and then we'll be able to share with everybody who's in attendance today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, let's jump right in. Okay, so a lot of organizations last year made temporary remote plans to keep their teams safe during the COVID pandemic. But now we're thinking forward, and a lot of teams I feel like they're liking it a lot more, and they're seeing that it works way more than they thought it would in the past. And so they're trying to figure out what's next. So Kay, do you want to talk about where we need to be going from here?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting because right around the time that all this, I cannot believe the pandemic. It's almost like the anniversary of Corona, y'all. Yeah. Like, what? What? Feels like it was just yesterday, and we're still in it. So, but I remember because we were working with so many firms last year, especially a lot of big tech firms who were navigating, and I think we're some of the earliest ones that I noticed were starting to navigate to remote and trying to get their teams remote as quickly as possible. And we just saw, how they were working to support their people, And we thought, well, what if it would make sense to host an executive roundtable with some of the firms that we were working with? So we got like Amazon and Google and Tesla all at the table to discuss what they were doing and how they were adapting to this massive shift to remote work. And we turned those key findings into our spring 2020 white paper on the future of work culture, which we have on our website. And the key findings then, it's funny, it's just they're as true, I think, as they were then as they are now. So flexible working policies help foster and retain current employees, but because it shows that you care, that you can't ignore psychological safety, especially in a virtual environment, and that collaboration and connectivity is possible as long as you're bringing equity into the equation, because we know that diverse groups have been impacted in different ways. So this is where I think organizations really have had to think critically about their culture and how they're exercising their values in a remote world and how their employees are benefiting from those values. So I think we all know that remote or blended work in some form, when Corona is finally over, we can all celebrate, yay vaccine, Kimberly. It's going to stay. And so in conjunction with, we saw, Corona, we saw the global anti-racism movement kick off in 2020. Companies have really had to focus heavily on that equity piece and really making sure that even though people want to stay for working from home, that brings a whole other set of challenges to communication, connectivity, mental health, making sure people are adequately supported for all the different ways that they need help. And how do we optimize or continue to optimize our organizational practices to make sure we're really creating an inclusive and equitable culture for our employees at this time. So those are kind of my 2 cents. And I feel like I would have said the exact same thing a year ago, but it's what we're in. So,
yeah. I totally agree. And there have actually been a ton of studies since then, like a leading insurance provider, Zurich in the UK, they published flex work, part-time, job sharing on 80% of their job descriptions and actually achieved gender parity in their new leadership hires in 1 year. So, and that was done, the study was completed just before the coronavirus lockdown. So it is possible and it is done. Rocki, I think you wanted to say something on this topic.
Yeah, and I think that that's the perfect lead in talking about what Zurich did, because I think this is an exciting time to be able to expand your diversity initiatives, because in essence, what's happening is location bias is eroding, right? And let me tell you, I'm a perfect example. SmartRecruiters went remote first, right at the beginning of this, right? And if they had not done that when they got ready to hire a CDO, I would not have been interested in relocating at that time. I've done kind of the zip across the nation, not as many times as Kimberly has done it, but I've done that. And I wasn't in a place in my life where I wanted to do it, right? And so, it created an option for me, and it created an option for SmartRecruiters that wouldn't have existed before they were remote first. And I think that's the advantage when you start to think about the impact of remote work in your DEI strategy. I think it's really important, though, to say that using remote work as a DEI strategy only works when the implementation is strategic and supported and sincere, right?
Yeah.
Every phase of the recruitment and the onboarding process really needs to be recalibrated and thought about differently. Leaders have to be trained on how not only to successfully recruit remote workers, but now your leadership competencies and interactions change because you need to manage a diverse workforce. And that takes a different set of skills. You've got to look at your comp strategy and make sure it's calibrated to the equity that Kay talked about earlier. So it's really a phenomenal time for businesses to make like significant policy changes that really do lead to a more diverse workforce. But also, I think remote working takes away that excuse, guys. We can't say anymore, I can't find the people. That it's not going to fly when you have the option to work remotely. And so I think it forces us all to be a little bit more deliberate, but it also forces us to be a little bit more accountable.
Yeah, and if I can just add one thing to that, I mentioned, my transition across the country. I worked for Raytheon for quite a long time. My very first interview with Raytheon was with the office in Tewksbury. Tewksbury is a suburb of Boston, so not Boston proper, a suburban area. I really wanted to work for Raytheon. I had concerns about living in Tewksbury. So as a Black woman, I knew I needed to find a church. I wanted to find a place to get my hair done. I wanted a community, not completely homogenous, but I wanted people that I could relate with. They accommodated me originally, interviewed me on a Saturday. They understood my concerns. They helped, oh, we have 980, you could fly back home, whenever you want to. But I just knew it wasn't right for me. And so I respectfully declined the offer. A month later, a position came open with Raytheon in Indianapolis. And because I had established this relationship with the team in the Boston area, they were willing to say, yes, we extended her an offer. She declined. She'd be a great addition. Indianapolis was a no-brainer for me because it was 2.5 hours from home, a community that looked very much like the community that I grew up in. I literally resigned from the company I was working for on Friday and started in Indianapolis on Monday because it was easy. And so where, like I said, this was 2004, there wasn't a lot of global flexibility around remote talent or making accommodations. COVID forced a lot of companies to make that decision overnight, which reaffirmed that it was always possible, but not necessarily palatable for everybody at that point. So I'm not glad about a global pandemic. I am glad that we reached consensus almost overnight that you can do work, and it doesn't always mean that we all have to physically be in the same place at the same time.
That's right.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it seems like, Kimberly, and I'm so glad that you brought this up, it really seems like part of the work experience is maybe in part related to geography, and everybody wants to feel like they belong. And regarding location, which is the second question that we kind of just jumped right into anyway, like location it's important, but it's also not important for all of the reasons we just said. But where you work and like where you live, you want to feel like you have a community, you want to feel like you belong. And it's the whole experience together of community, wherever you work and wherever you live. So does anybody else want to talk about the flattening of geography, or do we feel like we covered that?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in here from the international perspective.
Yes.
I think that, obviously we have a US-based audience. I'm from America, so y'all, I'm not bashing it. I'm just saying there's other people, myself included, and quite a few, expats abroad, and just like people beyond. When we're talking to Rocky's point earlier about geographic locations and geographic location bias, my team is fully remote, right? I have people in Kenya, I have people in Sweden, I have people in the Dominican Republic. So there's just an entire group of people that we're not really tapping into. And I think that that's very exciting because now it's getting companies to think, well, the only thing that's setting us apart maybe was the idea that, they have to worry about a commute to work, or will they relocate because they want access to the same type of community and resources that Kimberly was mentioning when she was considering that position. And now that's not an excuse, right? And you're really thinking about, and I think it's not even just about the recruiting piece, but it's also the retention. I mean, how many women do I know, fellow female business owners like myself, who actually quit corporate because they were like, I want to have children, and I don't see how having children is compatible with the corporate lifestyle and the work that's expected of me and the responsibilities that are placed on my shoulders. So I think there's a lot of really cool elements there. And sometimes it's not as, I think there's also so many different ways that we can expand opportunities internationally and also equitably across places that, maybe the only thing that they didn't have was the access to a passport to enter the country. And I think that's a really intriguing thing.
Yeah, Rocki?
Yeah, so I think there's another piece and even another layer to this, right? If you're differently abled, oftentimes coming into a traditional work setting is difficult, right? And so remote working is also enhancing accessibility. Many differently abled job candidates struggle with commuting or navigating, the dynamic in an office setting. And so remote work opens up those opportunities as well. And I just think, though, when we think about here's all the benefits to remote working, I think as we go to implement that, there's a couple of things that we just need to be aware of. And it's aware of how biases are going to start to shift and change as we approach this, right? So if you think about affinity bias, people like to hire people that look like themselves. They have a tendency to trust them more. And so now when I can't have someone sitting in front of me to manage them, I think we're going to see an increase in affinity bias, right? Because managers are going to feel like they need to trust. And if you're sitting someplace where I can't see you, then I'm going to want to trust you, right? And how does what I'm going to generally lump in as appearance bias start to come into that? That person doesn't look like me. I don't get to interact with them differently, in the same way. I'm on a conference call, and all of those things that we think about appearance, whether it be their skin tone is different, they're not as pretty or handsome, or you know what, I'm a curvy girl, so they don't fit into like this preconceived notion of the package looks like. And again, when we can't have people sitting there and you can't get that face-to-face interaction, those biases are going to grow. So I think that we need to be super, super aware as we're going through this process of those biases. And I think I learned a lesson this year when my previous company went remote, right? I looked at something through a very privileged point of view. I have high-speed internet. There's 600 computers and tablets and smartphones running around my house, right? And so as we went through that situation and we transitioned in that, I didn't think about the fact that in the United States of America, for people who were working in corporate America, there were individuals that didn't have unlimited high-speed internet programs. And the problem wasn't that they didn't have it. The problem was that I looked at it through a lens of privilege and I didn't consider it. Right. So
Rocki,
I think,
can we I feel like now is a perfect time to skip ahead to question 5. Is it okay if we jump right into that and then we'll come back?
Go for it.
All right, awesome. So I'm gonna pitch you this question because it was for you anyway, but how is technology and automation impacting the remote hiring and remote working world? And I feel like you're addressing the remote working part now, and that's so critical.
Absolutely. And you have to have policies and questions as you're onboarding people that take into consideration things like internet access, right? And what that looks like, and ergonomics, and what that feels like. Like I as we went into these virtual environments, like it kills me. I remember watching a colleague of mine on a Zoom meeting, and this colleague of mine had to be 6'4", and he was sitting in his kid's bedroom, like at the bottom bunk, bent over like this. And all I could think about is like, how is he gonna walk 2 days from now? Like, this is not gonna work, right? Which brings up another issue about ergonomics and how that plays into it, right? So that's just a bit of a side note. But I think when you think about technology, what this comes down to is communication is now like 1,000,000 times more important. So we're forced to like engage in real time, but at the same time recreate this feeling of camaraderie. So, it's like Zoom and Slack and MS Teams is now the standard way of communication. I never thought in my lifetime making a phone call would seem dated. Like, when's the last time you guys had a phone conference, right? It's this type of platform, right? And as you look at the hiring process, it even becomes more important. So I know for us as an organization, like SmartRecruiters in its applicant tracking tech, right, has implemented like the first natively built text message solution. So you know what? You're trying to interact with people. You're not trying to manage your phone and WhatsApp and email over here, et cetera, and SMS here. You can manage that all from one dashboard because people expect that kind of cadence of real-time communication. We're also, I think, going to see a lot more dependency upon AI and chatbots. So like for our organization, we implemented SmartPal, and that allows us and our customers to have like real-time engagement with candidates who have questions 24/7, multiple languages, real time, so people feel engaged and I don't have to wait to get a standard question answered. And so and I think the last thing that I'm thinking about from a tech perspective is I'm a new employee. I started my job 2 months ago. And as I went through that onboarding process, the tech was clear, right? From my very first, from the time I accepted the offer until actually throughout onboarding, you could see how the tech was keeping me engaged and telling me what was going to happen next and telling me where I could interact and making sure I got my computers and systems on time and the ability to test that, and a whole portal where I could get training and the ability to schedule meetings and tools like Calendly. I mean, tech is going to be critical for us to work in this world.
Yeah, I totally agree. So in a past life, I worked at a company that had video interviewing technology. And in that space, the big thing was all of the biases that can creep in from that, including whether facial recognition was involved or wasn't involved. So I think that from a technology perspective too, like, of course, we're seeing the more texting and chatbot oriented solutions, but we're also then seeing some of the more visible solutions. And so, Rocki, I feel like I'm totally putting you on the spot, but can you speak to maybe some potential areas for bias and maybe how companies can still implement those solutions, but overcome them if that's even possible?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways I believe to approach that, right? So now there's technology that's playing with taking voice and making that voice sound unisex. So you don't know whether you're talking to a male or a female. There's tech that is allowing people to have a video experience that's a little bit blurred, so you can't have bias there. I personally think, and I appreciate all those technologies in some organizations, that's certainly the way to go to build muscle about eradicating bias. I still think a little bit, I guess, old fashioned. And I think the best way to kind of make sure this is integrated is to make it part of your culture. Yeah. And to hold people accountable and to be able to look at the data as to where you have trends and in hiring, and to continuously train and to hold the whole organization and help everybody understand their role in diversity, because diversity doesn't belong to a chief diversity officer or a CEO or a chief people officer. It belongs to all of us. And I think the best way to be able to get past that is to drive cultures where everybody understands their role in the process.
Yeah. So, Kimberly.
I wanted to just add one thing about technology. I have several members of my team who are also parents of little children. And when everybody transitioned to remote overnight, most of them don't have dedicated office space at home. And so I'm also I see this question about equity. And so I want to talk about equity specific to technology. Everybody was told you can go into the office and get your monitor and get your office chair. Most of my parents of small children who didn't have dedicated office space said, if I bring a monitor home, it will take about 2 seconds for my kids to knock this over on the floor. And so we said, okay, what are some other things we can do to help support you? We did 2 things. One, if they had a smart TV, they could connect and then just make the TV their monitor, so they didn't have to worry about another piece of technology. Those who didn't, we were able to look at the small projectors. And so now you just cast onto a wall, and a small projector versus a monitor. And so again, trying to help people create an environment that's similar ergonomically to what they have in the office, but understanding what technology solutions had to be available to us to provide to them for them to be able to have a similar or same experience to, kind of maintain sanity and productivity. So that was something that we had to figure out overnight, and people were very satisfied with those 2 as solutions.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
So I don't have kids, but we recently got a puppy. And so our office, we have a dedicated office because I've been working from home for my entire career. And now I can't use the office anymore because there's too many cables. The puppy doesn't deal well with carpet. So I'm working from my kitchen table, which was not designed to be an office right now. And so I've had to make adjustments to my work style. Now my husband's home. So now we're sharing the kitchen table that was not designed for either of us to be there. So creating situations that do work, especially when things change, like people have kids or families, or there's multiple people working from home now. And it is really important, and it is really critical to that equity piece and creating viable and ergonomic work situations. All right, I would like to go back up to question 3, which is talking about the intersection between generations in the workplace. So today, 58% of the workforce is either millennial or Gen Z. Kay, myself, we're both millennials. So yes, so shout out to all the millennials on the call. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so how are these generations driving action around remote work and diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives?
Yeah, so I mean, it's so fascinating to me when I've seen DEI, kind of the conversations have shifted. I would say that before Corona hit, the biggest challenge for companies I was talking to was this multi-generational piece of how are you going to get people who are like, I just want to pick up a phone or talk to you in person to talk to the people who are like, I'll text you. Right, within the same organization. And I think that's still even more true today, just because a millennial like me, and we were talking about this earlier, Micole, our generation invented Instagram and Facebook, so we like to be seen, right? But I think it's just as important to remember that idea of us wanting to be seen, I really think comes down to a generational desire for authenticity, for purpose, for being able to, I think this whole idea of bringing your whole self to work really originated with our generation and is now being even, expanded upon in Gen Z. My 18-year-old niece is, trying to teach me TikTok, and I just don't get it. Like, it just goes to show you how massive, it's a small difference, but it's a completely different generation from us, right? So jokes aside, I think that I read a study recently that said that for every 100 straight white men that's leaving the workforce, only 66 straight white men are actually replacing them as more millennials and Gen Z employees join. So, when you think about what that means, the identities span more women, more BIPOC, more people who identify as part of the LGBTQ community, more people who identify as non-binary in gender, more multilingual people, more children and grandchildren of immigrants, et cetera. And so I think it's really important to remember that the key takeaway for me, as I've worked with multi-generational workforces, as a millennial myself who's had to navigate those different dynamics, that my generation, Gen Z, and anyone who's coming afterwards don't just want their companies to care about things like remote work and flexible working, but really just diversity and inclusion in general, because we live inside those intersections every day in our identities, right? So I'd often talk about with clients this idea of identity boxes, the ones that we're normally using to report trends and discussing which racial or ethnic or gender group we need to highlight more at work. Many of those, I would say, I'm watching disappear with the upcoming generation, or I'm seeing more of those intersections happening. So I'm encouraging clients to think about your workforce as being more multi-hyphenate, more occupying those different multiple identities, and what you're doing to create a culture to really serve them, especially as our workplaces are no longer tied to physical settings, and our ideas of how we define ourselves are becoming increasingly more, we'll say, complex, right? So I think what the challenge now is as we're dealing with multi-generational workforces, as we're seeing how that looks like in a remote setting where we're not necessarily interacting with each other in the same way, the only way that we can lay the groundwork for, the only way that any organization rather can survive is by laying the groundwork for creating a culture that is truly inclusive of all those different identities, or at least making the effort to try and create spaces for compassionate collision. And I think that's the real challenge with DEI that I'm seeing.
Yeah, so at Fairygodboss, we've learned that people want, especially women and especially underrepresented employees or candidates, they want to see role models, people like them at work. So that even creates much more of a need to have role models that look like candidates you're looking to attract, to sharing their stories, to making sure that you have strong positive reviews and you're sharing them from people like them. And it really goes back to belonging, like making sure people will feel like they belong even before they get to the workforce, because that's what's making people apply and stay. And Kimberly, I know that you have thoughts on how this all relates to remote work and remote work options. So would you like to speak to that?
So a couple things. So here, I'm in this interesting intersection of LA County, Orange County, Riverside County, San Bernardino County, all completely different from each other. And so where downtown LA, one of the other areas I had a lot of clients in Culver City, and then in Irvine, kind of right in the central part of Irvine, there are these business building shrines, beautiful lights, parking lot, valet service, beanbag chairs, co-working space. So where companies had invested all of this money into a place where people spend 40 to 50 hours a week, we've shifted. Now, they had already started being a shift because a lot of people wanted flexibility, especially in cities that are metropolises where you would spend an inordinate amount of time commuting. And so you're like, man, if I could just work from home a couple days a week. And in some organizations, people were begging for that. It switched overnight. Now that we've done it and it happened overnight and we've done it so consistently, and organizations have not died because of it. And so there was this thought that if I can't see you, I don't know that you're working. Like, what kind of taskmaster are you that you had to see what somebody was doing? Because let me tell you, I could sit at work and be on Amazon all day. Absolutely. And it looked like I'm working. So this notion that I have to I can walk past your desk, make a little path in the carpet to check, to make sure that you were working. Remote first, and the fact that people were able to continue working. The other piece is, and I think this is somewhat generational, I learned this too when I worked at NASA. We had NASA engineers who worked what we called Mars time. And so there were times that it didn't align with an 8 to 5. The satellite was feeding information in the middle of the night, so they adjusted their hours. So not only am I working from home, maybe I am more productive at 2 a.m. and not 12 p.m. And so I don't waste time commuting. And I may spread out my 8 or 6 or 14 hours in chunks across the day because I'm more productive. Also for a couple other reasons. If I am now worker and teacher because my kids are at home, and for some organizations, your meeting schedule became from 8 to 5, one solid block, have companies been thoughtful enough that people who are parents can't take a meeting schedule that's 8 to 5? Maybe they are working from 7 to 9. They become teacher from 9 to 10:30. I have a coworker who said, listen, I can't just send my daughter in the room. She's learning how to use scissors. I need to be in there with her as she's learning how to use scissors. So the other piece of this is around remote first. Even if your organization has not declared remote first as a strategy, please know you've declared it because you are competing against organizations that have declared it. So you have talent that is saying, but I can stay where I'm at, or this other company is courting me and they are remote first. And so we understand that there are some industries that you can't make a car from home. You have to be on the production line to do that. But to be an accountant, to be an HR leader, to be a marketing manager, to be a communications, manager, you can do that all from remote. So being thoughtful about how you leverage this interest and capability from an organization, from a world that is now remote first, to do that, I think that'll be what delineates those companies that continue to thrive well beyond whatever this next version of our world is once COVID is under more control.
Kimberly, there's Micole, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
Like there's such you just talked about it, and we brought up that war for talent again, right? I think some of us kind of think because we're in the middle of COVID and people have been furloughed and lost that there's not still a war for talent. There is absolutely still a war for talent, right?
Absolutely.
So let's be clear, the war has not been won. And I want to go back to the kind of point about generations, right? Because I feel like I need to rep for Generation X and the baby boomers, right? I feel like we need a voice at the seat of the table. And let's be clear, there's plenty of us that like to be seen too. I'm one of them, I know, right? Right. See, right. But sincerely, I think as you were talking, Kay, and we have to recognize we literally have 5 generations in the workplace right now, right? And it is, I love that. What did you call it? Like collaborative collision. Like I love that. We are all doing that. But one of the points that I think you made about all of the intersectionality, et cetera, it's worth noting that I wonder if that intersectionality has changed over time, or whether the new generation has just fought to have it recognized. I would be willing to bet if you went back and did a survey of all of us Xers and boomers who are in the workplace, you'd find the same level of intersectionality, all of the complexity. The difference is we were not brought into cultures where that was okay. I mean, hell, quite frankly, we're still battling some of the basic things. I still have to battle being a Black woman in corporate America here. And we don't like to have that conversation. But I think when we talk about generations, ultimately, I think we're all looking at the heart of it for the same thing. It's how we communicate and how we show up and how we want you to interact back with us and how we want to interact together. And if we don't get that right, if we don't take the time to break through those stereotypes and the myths, organizations who don't do that are going to find themselves losing at the battle for war, losing the war for talent.
Yeah, Rocki, to speak to that point, I think I read something somewhere that like 1 million tech jobs went unfilled, and I think it was last year. So there's still so many jobs, and like you said, in accounting, like super traditional work environment could never go remote. My husband and my mom are both CPAs, fully remote, and their teams are loving it. My mom's in charge of a whole department. She's gone in to pick up mail maybe once or twice since the pandemic started, and that's it. And she's like, I need to be at home to show other people it's okay. Things that they never thought were possible are now possible because that's the world we live in. Okay, watching the clock, I want to kind of move on to one of the more important questions, in my opinion, which is how do you keep candidates and employees engaged in this remote environment? Kimberly, you want to kick this off?
Yeah, so Dave and I had a great discussion about this. So Kay, what you mentioned about a generation who invented technology, am I the person to, call you, text you, or FaceTime you? And so where use of Zoom, WebEx, whatever it is, allows you to connect with people, this is very one-dimensional. Because I can't reach out and hug you and touch you because I miss you. Or, when we're in a conference room, you're accustomed to, if Rocki made a good point, I might hit you like, girl, yes, I agree with you. We lost all of that. We lost all of that. So being able to engage people through technology has to be more than just the fact that I can see you, but the quality of the discussions that you have and the use of the full universe of tools and resources. I will tell you, I spent one whole afternoon on a Saturday clicking on every feature Zoom had so that I knew what I could do. Oh, I can add a crown in my little virtual thing. Everybody has mastered the virtual background, but being able to use like the annotation feature, and I think people are starting to use it in team meetings, but I dare you to try it with a candidate or a group of candidates to create better engagement, because I appreciate that I can see you. I appreciate that we're talking, but this is one-dimensional. And I want to find a different way to create. When I finish with you, did we play a game? Was it Family Feud? Did you give me a link and now open up something? Are you using tools like Menti where we're being, completely interactive? So be more than just connected, be interconnected so that you really have a positive experience with people.
All right, Kay, one more thing, and then I'm going to ask you guys the last question to say one thing that you expect around the corner. But Kay, really quickly.
Yeah, definitely. I love Kimberly's point. I think that we have to really remember that because of this one-dimensional nature of technology, we're missing the time for time together.
Mm-hmm.
And so wherever you can create those pockets, I think we have to be much more strategic. And we have so many tools at our disposal to do this through the asynchronous and synchronous tools. And then when it comes to harder conversations that require processing trauma, or sitting in, hey, my mental health is not okay because I'm a homeschooling hero, trying to figure out, balancing my kids' education with making sure that my deadlines are met, and I don't know what to do. You can give people space to process that in channels that they're ready to tackle whenever they have that free hour. So it's just one last point that I wanted to mention to build on that.
I love that you said that. All right, really quickly, because we're like super out of time. All right, what's one thing each of you are expecting to see moving forward?
I think you're going to see micro learning as a way to train and engage.
All right, great. Kay?
I'd say really just thinking about the connection between remote work and DEI and the fact that you're really just creating agile teams, and any organization that isn't investing in DEI and flexible working as a part of that policy is not going to survive in the next 10, 20 years.
All right, Kimberly, you want to round us out?
Yes. So this conversation, what came first, chicken or the egg? Are we pushing technology or is technology pushing us? And so, especially in the area of talent acquisition, we have lamented every year, technology, they're not giving us what we want. But I'm like, but we've been doing the same thing, posting recs, talking to candidates, extending an offer. And so because technology is so critical, will the technology industry through their innovation keep giving us new things? Or are we going to be pushing because of what we're asking and how we're operating, asking the technology industries to give us better, faster, more creative ways to really engage with each other? Can I be a hologram in my meetings like Tupac was at Coachella versus just being, this one-dimensional person on a Zoom call? So those are the things that I'm expecting and looking forward to.
All right, it looks like we are out of time. Thank you so much, Kay, Rocki, Kimberly. It's been amazing.